Hello, friends, and welcome to the show. This episode, I'll be talking about Glenn Kessler and the Washington Post are still full of crap, jumping over the hill. The Lincoln Project called Weaver a predator, a liar, and an abuser. If you don't know, Weaver's the gentleman from the Lincoln Project who liked to groom 15-year-old boys. House Democrats call for demographic breakdown on COVID 19 vaccines, and CNN to Governor Whitmer. Do you now believe in hindsight that the anti lockdown protest in Lansing was a dry run of some kind for what happened with the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th? A sort of dress rehearsal. Let's get started with that.
I want to ask you about the Department of Homeland Security's warning that went out last week about the increase of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism.
So, is it an increase from last year? Because I'm old enough to remember last year was nonstop violence. Last year was nonstop buildings on fire, cops having bricks thrown at them, all in the name for change. And guess what you call violence in the name of political change? That's called terrorism, friends. And if it's done domestically, oh my goodness, we have domestic terrorism. So don't say this is a brand new phenomenon. You normalized this. CNN normalized this behavior last year. And now, when the people that they dislike magically started using this tactic, and it was just a one-time thing, and there was a lot of suspicious things going around with the Capitol riot, right? There was not enough police there. The mayor turned down federal assistance. The mayor turned down National Guard troops. The mayor did not have enough police presence to deal with the 1.3 million people that were there. And yet, there is no blame being assigned to her. Everybody else has received blame. The sergeants at arms for the House and the Senate have been relieved of duty. The police chief for the Capitol Police has resigned. So, a lot of people have basically had their heads chopped off due to their incompetence. But I believe one of the main culprits of being incompetent still hasn't even been accused of being incompetent. And that's kind of criminal, especially from news organizations. They need to be asking the tough questions, but obviously they're not. And this is actually a bipartisan thing. No one's actually talking about Whitmer. No one has brought up the question other than some news articles basically saying, hey, why did she deny this? But that's not hitting the news cycle. No one's actually talking about it. They're not saying, well, why didn't you do this? Why wouldn't you even consider that? There was intelligence on the ground that people have been planning this for months. Why were there not enough police? Why were there not enough security around the Capitol building? What was your plan? What was your logic behind it? What was your reasoning? Why did you deny all the backup? Right? There's so many questions that need to be asked, and nobody's asking it. Let's keep going.
You are no stranger to this. Obviously, you have been on the receiving end of this in Michigan. And what we saw happen at the State House in Michigan in April of 2020, here is some video of this. Do you now believe, in hindsight, that this was a dry run of some kind for what happened with the insurrection at the Capitol?
All right. That's such a BS question. This happened nearly a year ago. How can this be seen as a dry run? They came in peacefully, I'm pretty sure. I don't believe they broke in doors. I'm pretty sure no one was killed on either side. They went in and they were screaming because they wanted to go back to work. They saw the mayor, they saw the mayor's family be able to do whatever they wanted to do while these individuals were losing everything due to the draconian lockdowns. They weren't allowed to work and they weren't being paid for not working, right? The government wasn't subsidizing them for not working. So what are they supposed to do? These people were desperate. You still have people in America that are desperate because they still can't work and they're still not receiving the $2,000 checks that Warnock said. He said, vote for me and you'll get a $2,000 check. Again, I still believe that's a bribe, but guess what? There's still not a $2,000 check. And now it's $1,400. Now they're talking about a $1,000 check. Now they're talking about means testing a check. What the heck is going on? Stick with a plan. If you're going to say something, if you say you're going to do something, stick to it. Don't disappoint people. Democrats, take the easy win. It's not that hard. You promised a $2,000 check. deliver on that $2,000 check. If you don't, you're going to have a lot of people who kind of crossed over thinking that I really need that $2,000. I'll suck it up. I normally vote red and I voted blue because I really need the money and I can suck it up for 2 years. And guess what? They're going to say never again. And then you're going to have people that voted blue, no matter who, go, well, why did I vote blue? Because when I needed help and they promised that they were going to help me, they did everything but help me. And they blamed the minority party and they had no influence. They had no say on what was going on. They didn't even bring it to a floor vote. That's one thing. If the Senate or the House were to take the stimulus bill for a vote, and then the GOP were to filibuster or they were to strike it down, not have enough votes, etc., then you can have an excuse and say, look, it's the GOP holding it up. But right now, you're not even taking it to the floor. So it's a non-starter, right? You can't even blame it on the GOP if they haven't done anything yet. You can't say, well, they are going to do it. Well, you don't know what's going to happen because anything can happen, right? We didn't know what was going to happen on the 6th until the 6th happened. So it's kind of bananas. People need to be more genuine. People need to be more authentic. This sort of talk saying, well, this seemed like a dry run. Oh, it's all only the far right wing. No, bro. Portland is still under massive riots, even since Biden has taken office, and no one's calling that terrorism. You had armed people go into a hotel, occupy a hotel, threaten people inside that hotel, and guess what? You're still not calling that terrorism. They want to influence policy. That is domestic terrorism. So don't try to only label your political opposition terrorists while calling your people activists or just, bad apples or whatever, and try to go, oh, well, that's not really part of the whole. That's not something we really like to focus on. They're just, outside, or, those are actually Proud Boys or whatever. Those aren't actually Antifa or whatever. Antifa's just a thought. That's not really a thing. No, it's not a thought for a year. At a certain point, you have to acknowledge that it exists, right? It's been going on for a year. It's been just nonstop nonsense. We need to address it. And domestic terrorism on both sides is wrong. Violence for no reason is wrong. Controlled violence is appropriate, but violence for what? What is it going to accomplish? What did the Capitol riots accomplish? What is being accomplished in Portland? What's being accomplished throughout the country last year when buildings were on fire, businesses were destroyed, things were looted? What was accomplished? Nothing was accomplished through the acts of looting. It was all through the peaceful protests. It was all through the activism. It was all through the civil disobedience. So that's what needs to be promoted. That's what needs to be seen. But only showing the one side at their worst, but only showing the other side at their best is really disingenuous, especially when the one side, when their one time was at their worst, was only one time, as opposed to 10% of the time, and it happens hundreds and hundreds of times last year. So you need to put it in perspective. So you had one slip up from one group and you want to label half the country domestic terrorists. You had hundreds of people or hundreds of events last year that turned into riots where more people died than unarmed black people from police during these riots last year. And that's just, we're just not going to talk about it. Come on, you gotta be even-handed with this. You have to go, no, both are wrong. Both are terrorism. If you're going to use violence and destruction to influence a political change, if you're going to do it to change policy, that is domestic terrorism. We need to be consistent about it. You can't have two standards. You cannot have a united country that way. All right, let's jump over to House Democrat calls for demographic breakdown on COVID-19 vaccine. Rep. Grace Meng of New York on Sunday called on Javier Becerra, President Biden's nominee for Health and Human Services Secretary, to collect and provide data breaking down the demographics of vaccine administration in order to address health inequities across vulnerable populations. Racial inequities in health, justice, housing, employment, and education have been rife and buried deeply into our nation's social fabric, Meng said in a statement. Blacks, Asians, Hispanics, Native Americans, other minority groups, and the LGBTQI communities and disabled Americans have struggled to achieve true equality before the national health pandemic happened. Meng is currently looking to get other lawmakers to sign a letter to Becerra, which she plans to send on Monday. A national demographic breakdown of administered COVID 19 vaccines is imperative for Congress to assess and address where gaps are in COVID 19 vaccination rollout, Meng wrote. This information will also be critical in addressing long term health disparities and racial inequalities among vulnerable populations. Everyone must be vaccinated, and communities of colors must have equal access, Meng said. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm old enough to remember where there has been a lot of reporting of how older minorities do not want to take this vaccine because they remember the Tuskegee experiments. They don't want to be the guinea pigs. They don't want the vaccine. And it's not a racial thing. Well, it is sort of a racial thing, but it's because they don't trust the medical system. They've been used. You have certain populations in the minority population that have been used as guinea pigs before, and they don't want to be used that way again. And they feel that way. You have a vaccine that's been rolled out extremely quickly, and they don't trust it. And can you blame them? You now have the president and the vice president who spent nearly a year saying that they wouldn't trust a vaccine produced by Trump because he would produce an unsafe vaccine. He would cut corners. He would try to have it produced or he would try to have it green lighted before the election. That way he can try to win it. So you have the news and the now the president and the vice president for months saying that it was impossible and it wouldn't be safe if it did happen. And you shouldn't trust anything coming from Trump. And then it happens. And guess what people are going to do? They're not going to trust it. So you have bipartisan untrustworthiness of the vaccine. So what are you supposed to accomplish? And it's not just that. Right now, the vaccine is still rolling out towards a lot of first responders. So I don't know what the demographic breakdown is of first responders, but you can't just say, well, the vaccine's only been rolled out for a month. We need to see what the demographics are. Well, no, because if the primary group that it's going out to is first responders, it's going to be whatever the demographic of first responders are, it's going to be the demographics of the vaccine rollout. And then also you have the argument that you have white people who live older than other minorities due to underlying health conditions. So you might have more white people having received the vaccines if they live longer. And so if they live longer, if they're older than the age of 70, if you have more white people that live older than the age of 70, and then you have minorities who don't trust the vaccine. So you kind of have, a perfect storm where you might not have as many minorities who want to take the vaccine. And it's not white people's fault. It's not even the government's fault. Well, it's the government's fault from 100 years ago, but it's not the government's fault that it's not being distributed equitably, right? They choose not to take it. And if it's their choice, it's their body. They're not being forced to take it. Until people are being forced to take it, you can't say, well, we need a demographic breakdown. We can't deny service to people who request the shot, because guess what? Are you going to say, well, no, you can't get the shot? We're going to go out of our way to find a minority to give this shot to. Well, that seems rather discriminatory, especially if you go there, because if you have to go hunt somebody down to go give them a shot, especially if they don't want it, right? Everybody knows that these vaccines are happening. They're doing a very good public announcements on all these vaccines and how important they are to get it finally. And so for what? I don't understand what the end game is. What is the purpose of the demographic breakdown on this? To only stir up division, because you're going to see, oh, well, too many white people are getting this. Well, are they going to say white people? Because a lot of times they don't say Latinos. And in her thing, they talk about the breakdown and she says, well, not enough Latinos are getting it. But when I check the block, it doesn't give me an option to say Hispanic. It says white, black, or other, I believe, or white, black, or Asian, it doesn't give an option for Hispanic. You have to say white and then Hispanic. So if you just go white, black, of course they're going to say, oh, there's so many white people getting this. It's like, well, how many Hispanics in there are getting it? Are you breaking it down to that? Or are you just going white, black, other, right? So it's questionable at best, and it's too early to break down the demographics. Right now, the first responders are getting it. Black and Hispanic Americans are more likely to work in jobs that expose them to the virus and are more likely to suffer from a more severe case of the virus due to underlying health conditions. So, this is another important thing. So, push vitamin D. Vitamin D is extremely important. People of color have a hard time producing vitamin D because it is produced through sunlight exposure, and those with more pigmentation of their skin produce less vitamin D naturally. Apart from the lack of access, vaccine hesitation may have also contributed to the lower immunization rate in these communities. A recent Pew research found that 42% of Black Americans said that they would get the vaccine compared to more than 60% of white and Hispanic adults. So again, it's a cultural thing. You treated this community so poorly, they don't trust they don't trust the medical system, and it's not going to quickly change. You can do whatever you want to do unless you're going to force people to take these shots. There's no way to really truly be equitable. You can set up a shot clinic right in front of wherever you want to set it up, wherever you think would be most culturally equitable. But if they're not going to take the shots, you can't force them unless you sign a law saying, if we tell you you're going to get a shot, you're going to get a shot. But you're going to find an uprising of people because you're going to have, if you have 58% of African Americans who do not want to take the shot, what are you supposed to do? Are you going to force those people to take the shot? Are you going to force 40% of white and Hispanic adults to take the shot? Are you going to force half the country to do something that they don't want to do? That sounds like a brewing of a civil war, if you ask me, because now you're having the federal government encroach on the individual freedoms, which is an encroachment of the Ninth Amendment. Biden's nominee for Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, addressed the apparent inequity in an interview last week and appeared to share in Meng's call for demographic data to be collected. We already know from the COVID crisis over the past year that there are certain communities that have been hard hit by the virus, that rural communities have had a harder time getting access to resources, that communities of colors have experienced more cases and deaths, that seniors have struggled, especially those in long-term facilities. Well, that makes sense because a lot of people in long-term living facilities have heart conditions, breathing conditions. They have those comorbidities, and there's a reason why they're there. It's because not necessarily that their family can take care of them all the time, because they have so many things that are wrong with them. So they're in those assisted living facilities so a healthcare provider can help take care of them. So of course, a lot of people living there would have those comorbidities that if you were to catch COVID would be extremely devastating to your health. We have got to make sure that we have data on where the vaccine is being administered so we can ensure that, in fact, it is being distributed equitably. So, like I said, you can put this wherever you want it, but as long as it's not being forced, you can set this up at every place where white people are not. But if all the minority groups that they mentioned earlier in the article refuse to take the shot, then what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to what? You're just going to have a bunch of vaccines go bad. So to me, it's more of a, you need to win the hearts and minds. This is more of like a psyops thing. You got to convince people that the vaccine is safe and that, hey, you have to have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They need to apologize for what they did. They need to reassure the country. They need to basically undo all the damage they've done in the past year, casting doubt on this vaccine. Same thing with the news organizations. You can't go, we need to have an independent panel of doctors to ensure that this vaccine is safe, says Cuomo and Newsom, before they deliver the vaccines. And as soon as Trump loses the election, they're like, I need as many vaccines as I can get because we need them all because we're some of the most populated states in the country. What hypocrisy. It's like, well, did you independently verify the the safety of no, well, Dr. Fauci said it's good. Well, you said nothing can be trusted by Trump for a year. You can't have it both ways, guys. And you wonder why people are afraid of the vaccine. You wonder why people are scared. You wonder why people are unsure. You wonder why half the country doesn't want to take it. And it's not just those far right-wing anti-vaxxers. It's actually bipartisan. There's people on both sides who don't want to take it, and it's because of this sort of nonsense. So before we keep going, why don't you go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you'd like to contribute to the show, please go to notcensoredyet.com/donate. You'll find links available where you can contribute to the show. Every little bit helps, and we would like to grow and produce consistent quality content free from outside influence. So let's jump over to the Hill. Lincoln Project co-founder John Weaver accused of sending provocative messages to young men. And again, this really bothers me. They are not young men. They are boys, 14-year-olds. 14-year-olds. That is not a young man. When you're dealing with a victim of a sexual nature, that is not a young man. That is a boy. Same thing with a girl. If that was so my daughter, when she's 14 years old, I'll address her as a young woman. I'll teach her how to be an adult, right? But if someone, God forbid, if something like that were to happen to her, guess what? They did that to a 14-year-old girl, and they better pray that the law gets to them before I get my hands on them, because they did something to my baby girl. And it's bananas that the news reporting, they don't say that he was sexting a boy. He was sexting a child. This is banana. Don't say young man. He's 14 years old, and he's a victim here. He's being groomed. He is a boy. It's something that needs to be addressed. You can't. This is dishonest. I understand the argument of a young man being 17 years, 11 months old. Okay, perhaps. But 14 years old, that is a boy, without a shadow of doubt. I'm sorry. When you have to wait nearly 5 years to be legal, you're still a boy. On to the article. A co-founder of the Lincoln Project is being accused of sending unwanted messages to young men, pressuring them for sexual favors in exchange for jobs and career advice, according to a new report. John Weaver, who worked for various national Republican candidates such as the late Senator John McCain and former Ohio Governor John Kasich, has been accused by nearly 24 men who said that they received suggestive messages from Weaver. One saying the messages began when he was 14 years old, the New York Times reported. The Times reported that Weaver in one message told one of the young men he would spoil you when we would see each other. Help you other times, give advice, counsel, help with bills, you help me sensually. Weaver reportedly added. Leaders of the Lincoln Project, an anti-Trump Republican group, they're not Republicans, they're Democrats. I'm sorry, because now they're saying, well, we're going to attack Trump. We're just going to attack the GOP. So they're not a Republican group. I'm sorry. Told the Times that they were made aware of the allegations against Weaver only when they began circulating on social media and elsewhere in news reports. There was no awareness or insinuations of any type of inappropriate behavior when we became aware of this chatter at the time, co-founder Steve Schmidt told the newspaper. Schmidt said Weaver denied the allegations when first confronted by the organization's leadership. In a statement on Sunday, the Lincoln Project called Weaver a predator, a liar, and an abuser. John Weaver led a secret life that was built on a foundation of deception at every level. We extend our deepest sympathies to those who were targeted by his deplorable and predatory behavior, others that were deplorable. We are disgusted and outraged that someone in a position of power and trust would use it for these means. The Lincoln Project said the details of the allegations, as they were reported by the Times on Sunday, were beyond anything any of us would have imagined, and we are absolutely shocked and sickened by it. Like so many, we have been betrayed and deceived by John Weaver, the statement added. We are grateful beyond words that at no time was John Weaver in the physical presence of any member of the Lincoln Project. Well, why would it matter? Why would it matter if he was around 50-year-old men? He didn't have a thing for fellow middle-aged men, for fellow old guys. Apparently, he had things for little boys, and he apparently met them. So what are you supposed to do? I don't understand what is going on here. Why it's just bananas. It's bananas. It's just, oh, I'm glad that he wasn't in physical presence of any member of the Lincoln Project. Well, all you guys are old. Unless you guys have a bunch of 14-year-olds running around, then I would still be asking a question: why the heck do you have a bunch of 14-year-olds running around? Weaver earlier this month first acknowledged sending what he called inappropriate sexual messages to young men. To the men I made uncomfortable through my messages that I viewed as consensual mutual conversations at the time. I am truly sorry, Weaver said on January 15th. They were inappropriate, and it was because of my failings that this discomfort was brought on you. Revealing he is gay, Weaver said, I have a wife and 2 kids who I love. My inability to reconcile those 2 truths has led to this agonizing place. So he, again, like pedophilia. So I know this is going to be a controversial thing to say. I know Milo Yiannopoulos has talked about this, where there's a little different culture within the homosexual community, where grooming is not necessarily always considered a bad thing. Sometimes you do kind of have a mentor. He has talked about that. But it is something where, if he's attracted to boys that are that young, it seems to be more of an issue of liking children as opposed to liking men. That would be one thing if he were into men that were also in their 20s, young interns straight out of college. But if that's not the issue and he's only targeting these teenagers, then the problem is with children. He likes little boys. That doesn't just make him gay, that makes him a pedophile. So that's something that needs to be addressed. That's something that needs to be talked about. That's something that needs to be looked into, because we don't know, because we're not getting all the answers. Right now, it's just a lot of speculation. People need to ask the tough questions, and they need to hold him accountable. Again, if this kid was 14 years old, why is the Hill reporting young man? I don't get it. 14 years old is not a young man if you're being targeted sexually by someone who's in their 50s, 60s. It's bananas. No, sorry. You are not a young man. You are a boy. You are too young to understand what's going on because you are 14 years old. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Because I'm pretty sure when you see teacher sleeps with boy, right, sleeps with student, they say a 14-year-old boy. They don't say 14-year-old young man. So please, for the love of God, say he was sexting a 14-year-old boy. You need to put context in it, and it needs to be a negative connotation, because it is. It shouldn't be something where it seems acceptable. Oh, he was sexting a young man. A young man's 18, 19, 20 years old, right? Arguably 23, 24, depending on how old you are, I guess, depending on your existential outlook on life. Young man could be varying in age. 14 years old is not a young man. That is still a boy, barely freaking going through puberty. It's bananas. Don't try to jump through those mental gymnastics with me. Sorry, unacceptable. Not going to happen. All right, media outlets conspire to slime Senator Tom Cotton. So I talked about this last week. I'm just going to touch on it again because now Glenn Kessler of the Washington Post actually gave it to Pinocchio, saying that when Tom Cotton says he has the Ranger tab, that he is a liar. And they used those articles from Slate, I believe, where they changed the context, where they changed what they said, what it means to be a Ranger. And they used that as a reference to give the Pinocchios. And that's bananas. That is Orwellian doublespeak. We're going to change the meaning of words. We're going to change history. The only history is now. There is no history back then. It's the only thing that happens is what's happening now. That history is today. And basically, don't worry about what happened yesterday. History is today. History is what we say it is. And I'll show you what's going on. Last weekend, Salon, not Slate, I'm sorry, an online magazine whose best days were probably 15 plus years ago and now appears to be a little more than a low-rent clickbait version of Mother Jones, published a hit piece on Senator Tom Cotton, accusing the man who served one tour in Iraq and another in Afghanistan and was awarded a Bronze Star of stolen valor. In his first run for Congress, Cotton leaned heavily on his military service, claiming to have had a U.S. Army Ranger, or claiming to have been a U.S. Army Ranger in Iraq and Afghanistan. Rather, Cotton attended Ranger School, a 2-month-long small unit tactical infantry course that literally anyone in the military is eligible to attend. And that is not true. My job was not eligible to be to go to Ranger School because my job was not eligible for that. Soldiers who complete the course earn the right to wear the Ranger tab, a small arch that reads Ranger, but in the eyes of the military, that does not make them an actual Army Ranger, which is BS. If you earn the Ranger tab, that means you did something that the majority of the people in the military are unable to do, right? A lot of them are unable, unwilling. They do not have the intestinal fortitude to go through that nonsense for months. And people go to Ranger School and they lose so much weight because it's just grueling. It's just a grind for months. I've seen friends that I went to Special Forces selection with that I dropped out of because I injured myself and I just couldn't hack it. But friends that made it through selection and then went through Ranger School and they came back like a little string bean because they lost so much weight. It is rigorous. Do not try to downplay it. Do not try to say, well, that doesn't make, no, shut up. Because you even have Special Forces people with the Ranger tab. And guess what? They're still Rangers, but they're Special Forces. So shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. There's a plethora of problems here, many of them recounted by National Review John McCormick. Yes, anyone could attend Ranger School, but relatively few complete it. Anyone can submit something to Salon for publication, but only only brain dead hacks can actually get jobs there. What makes a ranger a ranger? And then there's the line that's the crux of the entire charge against Cotton. Does earning the Ranger tab make you a ranger? Or is it only if you served in the 75th Ranger Regiment? The hack journalist Roger Solensberger cites no military authority for his contention that the Ranger tab is some sort of consolation prize given out to scrubs who graduate but don't serve in the 75th. Instead, he leans heavily on fact check by the Washington Post's Glenn Kessler, who gave 2 Pinocchios to another GOP Senate hopefuls in New Hampshire who also graduated from Ranger School but did not serve in the 75th Ranger Regiment, nor did he claim to have. Sullenberger's piece also includes this stunning bit, 3 paragraphs from the bottom. Kessler went to the retired colonel who headed the Ranger School between 2014 and 2016, who said the difference was indeed a matter of debate, but concluded should he was a Ranger qualified in his ads? Probably, maybe. So basically, the colonel who was in charge of the Ranger School said, well, he was Ranger qualified. Should he say he was Ranger qualified? Well, yeah. If he had the tab, probably, yeah, he is Ranger qualified because he went to Ranger School. He's tabbed. He is a Ranger. He just wasn't part of the regiment. Probably, maybe. This is what Kessler hung 2 Pinocchios on, and Sullenberger believes is stolen valor. As McCormick piece lays out, there is plenty of evidence that the belief that you have to have served in the 75th to truly be able to call yourself a Ranger is at best a minority view. Retired Command Sergeant Major Rick Moret, who served in the 75th Ranger Regiment, told the Arkansas Times over the weekend that Salon's attack on Cotton was absurd, unfair, and almost slanderous. He's 100% a Ranger, said Merritt. He will always be a Ranger. Both Major General Scott Miller and then Secretary of the Army John McHugh called all graduates of Ranger School in 2015 that they had the right to call themselves Ranger. To qualify for the U.S. Army Rangers Association Ranger Hall of Fame, service in the 75th is not required. The media treating Orwell's 1984 as a how-to guide. McCormick's piece also references a plethora of media outlets, including Time, CBS News, NBC News, Fox News, Newsweek, referring to Ranger School graduates as Rangers. Newsweek, the defunct print outlet that appears to exist mainly to drag journalism through the muck, that's obviously editorialized, went through the trouble of updating nearly a 5-year-old story to erase 2 women's accomplishments in the service of smearing Cotton. Courtesy of Internet Archive, here's the lead on the story as it appeared as recently as October 24th, 2020. For the first time in the Army Ranger School's 64-year of history, 2 women will have completed the intense training program and will become Rangers. As it appears today, for the first time in the Army Ranger School 64 history, 2 women will have completed the intense training program and will be allowed to wear the coveted Ranger tab on their uniforms. They appended correction. Correction. This article has been changed to note that the completion of the course allows one to wear the Ranger tab, but does not make one a Ranger. That is crazy. And then they add a joke. Working for Newsweek allows you to pretend to be a journalist. It does not make you one. So this just doublespeak. It's bananas. You can't change it. And then they talk about the preference thing. I think I brought it up last time where they used the way back when machine and basically said preference, the act of preferring, basically side by side. It's good, it's good, it's good until definition 5, where before it said orientation, sense to be, sexual preference. And then 5 on the updated one during the ACB hearings, offensive, see usage paragraph below, sexual preference. So they changed the meaning of the word in order to have a gotcha moment. So it is bananas. I don't understand what's going on. Update. The U.S. Army Ranger Association has released a statement taking Sullenberger and Kessler to task for attempting to take what the Ranger Association called a good-natured barracks debate and turning it into a cudgel to attack their political foes. I used that last term advisedly. Neither Sullenberger or Kessler is a disinterested truth teller. They are partisans working at mainstream media outlets, and I completely agree on that point. Kessler uses information that is obviously wrong to try to say, oh, well, you lied. That's 1 Pinocchio, 4 Pinocchios, however many Pinocchios he believes that you deserve to get his point across. And it is extremely disingenuous because he's not doing his job, right? If your job is to fact check, then you say it's up for debate. I wonder if he were to say, well, we need more evidence. We need, it's debatable. So you can't say he's lying if you literally have one side saying, well, if you have a tab, then you're a Ranger. And you have the other side saying, well, you need to be in a Ranger battalion to have actually been a Ranger. Then you can't say somebody's lying because it's literally up for debate. It's not lying. It's up for debate, right? It's debatable. It's not a lie. It's something that needs to be researched in further. We'll look more into it. We'll check into the U.S. Army Ranger Association. We'll check into the leadership from these Ranger academies. We'll check into all these things. But they're not doing that. They're just saying, well, we found one source. We changed an article 3 years ago, and we're using that as our base of reference. That's BS on so many levels. You can't change history to drive a narrative. Again, you can't have a united country where you can't even have a consistent history. Just come on, guys. Be authentic. Be honest. Do your job. Do your darn job. It is ridiculous that you are resorting to this. Are you saying that he's done nothing else worse than this? Are you telling me that he is untouchable other than this one thing? Then he sounds like a pretty good politician. He might be a butthole. A lot of people say he's a really bad guy. But if this is the worst thing you can dig up on Tom Cotton, then maybe he's not such a bad person. Like, I don't know. If this is the worst thing you can pull up, then possibly the problem is with you and not with him. But until next episode, which is going to drop down in a couple hours, I'll see you all later, friends. Bye.